Baker Mayfield, Seattle Seahawks. This is happening. So the Seattle Seahawks only have one veteran quarterback option available at this moment, aside from Drew Lock. But Baker to Seattle seems like a foregone conclusion on the internet. Is that right or not right?
At this point in the NFL, things have more or less begun to stabilize. I mean, for the most part, everyone knows what their team is going to look like for the 2022 NFL season. As a matter of fact, Scott Hansen just tweeted out that there was 10 more Sundays until NFL Red Zone returns. Which, speaking of which, man, I'm really excited for that. I'm planning on doing a fantasy football league with some of my Patreon patrons and some of the members of my Discord community. So if you're interested in that, make sure you join one of them or both. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is there are some players whose futures are definitely not certain. That sounds like something Aaron Rodgers was saying about a year and a half ago, saying that his future was uncertain before we got into that crazy offseason last year. So in this video, I want to talk about the player who has the most ambiguity in his future, Baker Mayfield. Make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. If you think I talk way too much in my YouTube videos while I upload 1-minute shorts on my TikTok page and on my Instagram page, so you should follow those as well. Now that we got all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Man, the Cleveland Browns and Baker Mayfield are in a very tough spot at this point. So this past week, we all were very much aware of the Deshaun Watson hearing, and really, we didn't get that much information about it. I thought it was going to be a very momentous week where we were going to be filled in on what's going on, but for the most part, the hearing was held behind closed doors, and all we know is there's a judge by the name of Sue Robinson that was going to hear everything out. We heard some tidbits throughout the week, like the NFL was going to argue for an indefinite suspension, maybe as long as a year, maybe even longer, which if that was to happen, I think we would all get together and just laugh at the Cleveland Browns for quite possibly the most Browns-like decision in NFL history. And that's saying something considering the history of the Cleveland Browns. But as time went on, we were hearing other things, like the NFL would not push back if it was only a 6 to 8 game suspension. And the reason why this is so significant is, one, obviously the Cleveland Browns want Deshaun Watson there this season for a majority of the season, because this is probably the year where their Super Bowl window is the most open. I don't know so much about next year or the year after, when Deshaun Watson's salary cap hit balloons from $10 million a year to like $50 million a year. But in addition to that, it seemed like the Cleveland Browns were just preparing for a 6 to 8 game suspension. As a matter of fact, we got a report earlier today that the Cleveland Browns signed Jacoby Brissett with the assumption that Deshaun Watson was going to miss about a quarter of the season at the very most. And if it was something more substantial than that, then they might enter the market for another quarterback, maybe like a Jimmy Garoppolo, which is kind of ironic because one of the quarterbacks that is the most available and honestly would be a very high-end backup for them is none other than Baker Mayfield. Now, in the past, Baker Mayfield has said at his camp that if the Cleveland Browns were to apologize, then there might be some hope for some reconciliation.
But would there be any chance of reconciliation there?
No, I think for that to happen, there would have to be some reaching out, but we're ready to move on, I think, on both sides.
And in that video, we addressed the fact that if there was only a 6 to 8 game stretch where the Cleveland Browns needed Baker Mayfield to play, their best option would be to let him play for those 6 to 8 games and then possibly trade him, or in Baker Mayfield's case, play those 6 to 8 games, hit free agency, and if you really dominate in those 6 to 8 games, then there's a chance that some team will pay you a significant sum of money to be their quarterback for the future. I mean, there's a lot that hinges on Baker Mayfield's decision for this upcoming season, and if he plays this situation right, he could get paid a significantly larger sum of money than, in my opinion, he is currently worth, or at the very minimum for the Cleveland Browns, if they could get Baker Mayfield to come back and play for these 6 to 8 games, they might be able to improve his value and trade him for a better draft pick. Because at the same time, in that very same Baker Mayfield interview, he said that it might be best for both both sides, the Cleveland Browns and Baker Mayfield, to move on?
I think it's been pretty obvious the mutual decision on both sides is to move on. You know, I'm thankful for my 4 years in Cleveland. There's a lot of ups and downs and a ton of learning experiences that, you know, I'll forever keep with me. You know, teammates and friends and relationships that I'll have for a lifetime.
There are still two major pursuers for Baker at this point. The first one is one that we actually made a video on a couple days ago, and it's the Seattle Seahawks. Drew Lock was literally memed for potentially being the starting quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks by the US Open's Twitter page. Yes. So when the US Open's roasting your starting QB, or I don't know, there's a heated QB battle between Geno Smith and Drew Lock, which I'm going to be absolutely obsessed with during training camp. I'm going to be bringing you guys a lot of updates about that specific QB competition, primarily because it's freaking hysterical. I'm sorry. I know if you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, you might be upset about this, but come on, bro. You have to pick between Drew Lock and Geno Smith. That is not ideal if you're a Seahawks fan at all whatsoever. Now, I hope your rebuild goes great, but as a result of that, you would think that the Seattle Seahawks would be down to at least look into trading for Baker Mayfield, give up a second-round pick or a third-round pick, or, you know, maybe take on some of his salary. It's not that much salary after all. You're a rebuilding team. What do you have to lose? Plug in Baker Mayfield in a run-heavy offensive scheme and see him frustrate DK Metcalf the way he frustrated Odell Beckham Jr. Well, according to Ian Rappaport, he said this via the Pat McAfee show, it appears as though, although you would think the Seattle Seahawks are frontrunners in the Baker Mayfield sweepstakes, that isn't necessarily the case. Take a look at this.
A couple times a year when this happens, where you get like an internet rumor that kind of takes on a life of its own. And believe me, like I always check, and I've heard nothing to corroborate Baker to the Seahawks at all. I don't know what's going to happen at the end of all this. Like maybe this guy announces he's trolling us, but like it seems crazy to me, but they have never really been that interested in Baker. Like what they have wanted is a Drew Lock v. Geno Smith battle.
Okay. I really wish that this would be on Hard Knocks. It would have been so funny to watch these two battle it out. I hope they both succeed. I hope one of them becomes a Pro Bowler, but come on. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up to you, because I know the Seahawks situation's weird, and I think we all know what they're doing. They're really committed to tanking this year because next year's QB class looks pretty freaking sweet. I mean, you got CJ Stroud coming in. You got Bryce Young coming in. I mean, that's just who we know right now. There might be some random dude that's going to shoot up draft boards just like the way Joe Burrow did the year that he became the #1 overall pick. You remember back then people were thinking that Tua Tagovailoa was going to be the #1 overall pick? Yeah, that didn't end up happening. So I could understand them being committed to tanking. They didn't even take a flyer on Matt Corral or Malik Willis, despite those potential first-round talents falling to the 3rd round this year, which means Baker Mayfield could only go to one place, and that's the Carolina Panthers. Ian actually said via the Pat McAfee show,
you know, obviously it's been the Carolina Panthers that have been most aggressive. I know some people thought a deal might happen by the end of minicamp. It did not. As we get closer to camp, things pick back up. Like if a trade is going to happen, probably going to happen before training camp at some point.
Carolina Panthers have been the most aggressive, and they thought that there would be a deal that would happen by the end of minicamp, but it didn't. So we'll see as we get closer to camp if things pick back up. If a trade's going to happen, it's probably going to happen before training camp at some point. So if this were to happen, I'd imagine Robbie Anderson potentially getting traded back, because you guys remember when Robbie Anderson tweeted those tweets pretty much not supporting Baker Mayfield, and this man's been very vocal when it comes to who is the individual that's throwing him the football. But if you ask me, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Carolina Panthers to pursue Baker. There's been talks about them trying to acquire Baker Mayfield, but the issue has been they don't want to take on as much salary as the Cleveland Browns are proposing for them. At the end of the day, this seems like a game of chicken between the Panthers and the Browns. I really want to see, because Baker could skew this whole thing based upon his willingness to be committed to the Cleveland Browns. If I was Baker Mayfield, I would swallow my pride, play 6 games for the Browns, look absolutely phenomenal in that brief period of time where I'm playing football for the Browns, where he has the ability to bet on himself and potentially cash out big if it works out for him. But I think what's probably the most likely scenario is the Carolina Panthers Panthers trading for Baker Mayfield and them receiving either like a second or a third round pick in return. I am absolutely in awe because I literally was about to export this video. I was about to upload this video, and the moment I was about to upload this video, which thank goodness I didn't, we got some breaking news from none other than Ian Rappaport. Now, first of all, I wanted to apologize if you found the lead up to this video to be a little bit irritating. I just felt like it was really cool that I said this before the trade ended up happening, and then the trade freaking happened. So if it was annoying, I apologize. I can understand if it irritated you guys, but we got breaking news from Ian Rappaport, who tweeted, a new quarterback in Carolina. The Panthers are acquiring former #1 overall pick Baker Mayfield from the Browns for a 2024 conditional 5th round draft pick. Sources tell me and Tom Pelissaro the deal is pending a physical. All parties split the financials to make it happen. I can't, bro. A conditional 5th round pick. All right, no, there's still more information on this. Ian Rappaport continues to say, finally, a great deal for Carolina and a great solution for all. After months of speculation and months of work for all parties, Baker Mayfield is now a Panther, and Jacoby Brissett is now the Browns' solution for a Deshaun Watson absence. Now, the financials are that the Browns will pay Baker Mayfield $10.5 million this season, which means they trimmed over $8 million in cash and salary cap space. The Panthers will pay Mayfield $5 million. Mayfield agreed to trim $3.5 million off of his base salary. And here's the cherry on top of this entire trade. Guess who Baker Mayfield plays in week 1? The Cleveland Browns. So this is going to be exciting. First of all, man, there's this meme that we always post on this channel called the Baker Mayfield cycle. And we all know that Baker Mayfield is absolutely at his best when he has a chip on his shoulder. And I don't think he has a bigger chip on his shoulder than right now, assuming he's able to beat out Sam Darnold and Matt Corral for the starting quarterback position. I feel like Baker Mayfield has a great opportunity with some truly phenomenal weapons in Carolina to boost his value and get himself a huge contract this summer following this season. Now, a lot could go down this season. There could be a lot of drama in Carolina because if Baker Mayfield doesn't perform well, I'm imagining that the Carolina Panthers will be very quick to turn to Sam Darnold, or maybe quick to put in the rookie Matt Corral. I think you guys have to understand how much pressure there is in Carolina currently. Matt Rule is definitely on the hot seat, so he needs to find a quarterback that could bring his team to relevance. Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield are going to both be searching for a reason to get big contract extensions. Matt Corral is in his first season and is already competing with 2 former first-round picks for hopefully eventually becoming the starting QB. But putting all that aside and the potential for some really fun drama to the side, the Carolina Panthers absolutely robbed the Cleveland Browns. I mean, all you had to do was give up a 5th round draft pick, and not this upcoming draft, but in the next upcoming draft. If Baker Mayfield decides to get up and leave after this season, then fine, it's just a 5th round pick. If he ends up being your QB of the future, if he ends up, which who knows, KTO made a great video on this, on how Baker Mayfield and Drew Brees had very similar careers so far. If he ends up going to the Carolina Panthers and becoming the equivalent to Drew Brees for the Carolina Panthers, which huge long shot, I just wanted to say, this will go down as the biggest robbery in NFL history in regards to trades. Honestly, for the Carolina Panthers, I give them an A+ for this trade. I mean, A+++++. I've never seen a situation handled better than this one. For Baker Mayfield, I'm really happy for him. He goes into a great situation as well. I don't necessarily know if the Panthers are going to be a better team than what he had in Cleveland, but nevertheless, it's a good chance for him to start new, and if he makes the most out of his opportunity, then he could cash out big in free agency. For the Cleveland Browns, man, I give him a D-. I mean, you could have handled this situation way better. If you wanted to move on from Baker Mayfield from the beginning of the offseason, if you felt like he wasn't your solution at the quarterback position, you should have traded him way before the Deshaun Watson situation went down. I mean, at the very least, try to trade him and have a contingency plan in place during the NFL draft so you could get better value than a freaking 2024 5th round pick. Maybe try to make it known to Deshaun Watson that you're interested in him, and once you come to a mutual agreement, trade Baker Mayfield for something better than a 2024 5th round pick. Obviously, maybe my expectations are too high because these situations are very difficult to navigate, And I just feel like Baker Mayfield is definitely worth more than a 2024 fifth round pick, especially when you consider the fact that the Cleveland Browns have no assets whatsoever, so they needed to get as many assets as they possibly could in order to somewhat mitigate the damage of the Deshaun Watson trade. Now, the only thing I have left to say about this trade, man, is somebody please check on Robbie Anderson, because I think he is now literally going to retire as a result of this trade. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check me out on Twitter. I'm going to post it all on Twitter. Let me know in the comment section down below what you grade this trade. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.